Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so glad you're tuning in today. I'm Ricky Stamps, Director of Programs and Events for Butterfield Trail Village, the best retirement community in this country. And I enjoy bringing to you the stories of our residents. We have such a variety of personalities and occupations and delightful people. And so today I am very honored to introduce to you Dr. Morris and Ann Henry of Fayetteville. And they have been involved in so many facets of the state of Arkansas through politics, philanthropy, education, and I just want to help you get to know them better. The first time I met the Henrys has been many, many years ago. I won't even say decades, but that really is the case. But I knew nothing of the contributions that this fine couple had made. All I saw were two loving people caring for their parents who were Butterfield residents. So Morris and Ann are second generation residents, and I do vaguely remember your father, Morris, Dr. Henry, as a resident, and Ann, your parents, Andy and Opal Rainwater, were a delightful couple that were here for many years. And I can remember just being in the hallways and Ann visiting and Morris with her many, many times, several times a week. And that warmed my heart. I know how much you care for your parents. And I know how much you care for your dad. And they both contributed to the community. And I'm just very honored to have you here so we can learn about your story.
Thanks.
So, Morris, you served our great state as a Democratic member of the Arkansas House of Representatives and Arkansas Senate between 67 and 84, quite the number of years. And you served on the Arkansas legislature for 20 years and the advisory council as chairman. And you've been involved in so many other organizations that we'll get to here in just a little bit. But besides all of your accomplishments that you have had over the last several decades, I want to go back a little further. And this always really puts a spirit of who someone is when you talk about your parents and your childhood. So why don't you just start, Morris, and tell us a little bit about what you remember as a child and move forward up through the beginning of your education.
My mother and dad were both ophthalmologists and practiced in Fort Smith. And I grew up in Fort Smith except during World War II when my dad was in the military and he was a commanding officer for a hospital down in Mississippi, in Laurel, Mississippi, and I stayed with him for about a year. My mother being a doctor, and doctors were in very short supply, so she had to stay back in Fort Smith and practice. Actually, after I graduated, though, from Fort Smith High School, I went to Hendrix College and then to Tennessee Medical School in Memphis and interned there. And then I went to Harvard for my residency program. Harvard is in Boston, and I did a 3-year program there, after which I served 2 years in the military in Germany as occupational force, and then came back and set up my practice in Fayetteville, Arkansas in '61. So that's sort of my background there.
A wonderful background, but let's jump back just a little bit to the time in the military. Tell us a little bit about what you did once you were there.
When I was in Germany, I had gone to Harvard for a purpose. They had developed a detached retina program, and this was the only one in the world at the time. And so I trained there, and then when they sent me to Germany, the Air Force had me trained in using a light coagulator, which was developed in Germany. And when I came back here, we were fortunate to get one of these light coagulators. And interesting enough, one of the other people in my class in Germany was from San Francisco. And so lasers had come out, and Washington Regional bought the light coagulator for me after I had proposed to Ann, so they wanted to make sure I was going to stay local. Anyway, this friend in the class developed a laser to a microscope, and Springdale Hospital bought that. So I was in pioneer work in treating retina work in this area for quite some time. interesting thing happened though. In Germany, at the class that we were taking in this light machine that was developed in Germany, somebody in the class asked the professor who did it, "What else are you treating besides detached retinas and tumors in the eye?" And he said, "Diabetes." And I thought, that doesn't make sense. But since I had the machine here, they called me from Little Rock at the Med Center and asked me if I would start treating some diabetics with it. I said, "Well, there's no protocol. It's not a proven instrument, but sure, I'll do it." And so they started having me sending patients up from over around the area to treat diabetics, and it seemed to help up to the point that in Memphis, the ophthalmologist had an organization there, and they asked me to come give my presentation. Well, this was so controversial that they developed a national program studying this, and sure enough, light coagulation really helped. And
That is so
it was
interesting.
interesting. Early on, we had no protocol, so it was kind of by the boots, you might say, how to treat these people. But now we have it very standardized, and so it's been interesting.
When we visited the other day, I mean, I have family members with diabetes, and it can affect your vision, especially if you aren't consistent in your health care. But you were telling me that you could examine someone almost and tell how advanced their diabetes was just because of their eye situation.
Early on, when before we even had the light machine developed at Harvard, where I was training, one of my professors said, "This patient's probably not going to live more than 5 years," because he looked in the eye at the diabetic changes, and what was going on in the eye was a good indication of how that person was going to survive or not. But now we have so much better control of the diabetes, and people that were really interested in taking care of themselves, they can prolong their life to a normal life.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Well, you were talking about the first light machine to help with repair detached retinas. And when someone has a detached retina, explain, is it an accident? Is it something that just happens?
It can be any of those. The retina is the lining of the eye that we use. It's sort of like a film in a camera for those people that can remember a film for cameras. And when the spool comes loose in the camera, everything's out of kilter. Well, the same thing happens in the eye. The lining of the eye, a film that actually turns light rays into brain waves that we can see with, and that comes loose when a hole develops in the retina. And so the laser or the light coagulator, we can weld it down before it comes loose, but once it comes loose, then we have to put the retina back in place and then tack it down with laser. Yes.
Okay, so eventually you went from the light machine to doing the laser procedures yourself, correct?
Yes, we had the Springdale Hospital with Joe Steele and Harvey Jones were very instrumental in getting the light coagulator and then the laser.
And I'm sure these machines were not cheap.
Oh, I was going to go in that deep to buy that machine when they called me and said, "The hospital's going to buy it for you."
That's awesome.
Yes.
That's one thing about Northwest Arkansas. There's been so many amazing families who have been blessed with wealth and finance, and they turn right around and give it back to the community.
Absolutely. This has been a real help to the whole area in many, many ways. That was just one example.
Well, what I'd like to do is switch to another story of sorts of how you have been involved with what eventually was the Nature Conservancy. But then, is it the Nature Conservancy or Arkansas Nature Conservancy?
We're the Arkansas chapter of the national.
There
it's
you
an
go.
international.
It's international.
I kind of knew that, but I needed a little reminding. Great organization. But you were sharing with me the story of Hobbs State Park and how that came to be. Why don't you tell us was that while you were in the legislature that came to be?
In those days, the legislature only met for 2 months every other year, so it really didn't interfere too much with my practice, especially since my mother and dad were in practice with me. So I had a good friend, Kanister Hodges, who was filling in for the United States Senate when Senator McClellan died, and he had been on the Game and Fish Commission beforehand. Well, Ernie Dean was a writer at the newspaper here, and he kept writing me about this Hobbs estate, 12,000 acres on adjacent to Beaver Lake, that was going to be for sale, and we ought to buy it. Well, Kanister and I were visiting, and he suggested I try to get that he would do what he could as a senator in the United States. And so I went to the game and fish people and said, we need to buy that 12,000 acres. And they said, we'd like to, but no money. And the Parks and Tourism the same way. Well, John Lewis was a banker here in town. I talked to him about it, and he said, well, the bankers meet quarterly, all the area bankers, and so why don't you present it to them? So I did, and they were supportive of it. Well, Kanister knew about an organization called Nature Conservancy, an international organization. And so David Pryor was the senator at the time. Anyway, Nature Conservancy had lawyers that would go to the family heirs in St. Louis and would discuss with them the tax advantages of selling it to the Nature Conservancy rather than to developers, which is what the word got out, and we were getting letters, and got some calls too. Don't do that. That thing is so valuable. The property for development purposes. Well, that also drained into Beaver Lake, and that was not such a good idea, we thought. But anyway, with Nature Conservancy's help, and Bill Clinton, who was Attorney General, went into as governor, and I was a senator at that time. And anyway, Nature Conservancy and the banks came together, and I suspect the Waltons, who owned some of the banks, had a lot to do with this, though they never said anything about it.
Of course. Yeah.
Actually, I had a $3 million check given to me to take down to the state, and we bought it. But Nature Conservancy, and before then, I never heard about it. But after this developed, we had set up a chapter in Arkansas. I served on the first board of the Nature Conservancy for Arkansas, and Ann took my place and served until recently. And we actually have been recently honored by making us emeritus on the Arkansas State Board.
Fabulous, fabulous honor. Nathan, show us the photograph of the gentleman. This was a special day when they were signing the papers.
Well, the legislature had,
It was
the legislature had to vote to pay the money.
okay.
This was a loan that we got from Nature Conservancy to buy it, and then the state came up with the money to buy it. So the state did come up with the money, and that was the day they signed the papers to sign it so that we could then.
Nathan, do you have the photograph of the men together? There we go. Morris is in straight behind the governor, or at the time was he?
He's governor.
Governor at the time. And
Bill Clinton.
most of the men, they're represented Northwest Arkansas and the
Correct.
Nature Conservancy. Well, there's moments like this that have put Arkansas on the map, and Hobbs State Park is a very popular destination, and so many people get to enjoy it because someone took the time and forethought to plan and save that land. There's no telling what it would be now if people like the two of you didn't dive in and get it taken care of.
Well, I was glad to be part of it. It was very pleasant.
Absolutely.
But working with these other people that all came together. But Nature Conservancy was the organization, and since then they have done a lot in Arkansas. You'd be amazed, but Ann can tell about that.
Absolutely. Well, Ann, let's switch to you. You have quite the political scene and consisted of serving as an independent political organization professional. I looked you up on LinkedIn.
Oh,
But you served 23 years as Associate Dean and Professor for the University of Arkansas School of Law.
no, business school.
Business
not the law
school.
school.
Well,
Yeah.
business school.
Yeah.
Apologies. But your philanthropic contributions include the Nature Conservancy, along with Morris, and both Trustee Emeritus, which is a fabulous honor. And you're key in the success of the Fayetteville Public Library expansion. And that was a job for you, I have no doubt, and I want you to tell us about that. And you are currently serving as the Commissioner of the Department of Pollution Control and Ecology for Arkansas.
Well, that's over. I did that for 4 years during the Buffalo River, and was helped. We got to make sure that the commission, the part now that the state, and they finally got their act together, and they're coming together to really help clean up the Buffalo and to get some things done that needed to be done. But that was in
And
the middle
Mr.
of.
Compton would be very proud.
Neil Compton would be proud of me. Yes,
And
he
so
would.
Miss Ellen
Yeah,
would too.
Yes, Ellen.
I know you were friends,
Yes,
you and Ellen.
since I moved here.
Yeah,
We were
absolutely.
in college together. So.
Well, go ahead and contribute to what you want to mention on the Conservancy at this point. I mean, when you first decided that's something you wanted to be a part of.
Well, when Morris, I was involved because we met with so many different groups trying to gain support to buy it. And then I had to listen to people complaining that they wanted somebody to develop it. I also knew about all the problems with, we didn't have, the land around here has a lot of terrain that it's hard to build without getting sewage and things like that into our drinking water, and we would be in real trouble if we did not have our Beaver Water District, and that, because that's our drinking water, and a lot of our things came as a result of having Beaver Lake go in.
Absolutely.
So it made sense to protect our water supply and our drinking water. So Morris was on the original board. I got involved there. We used to have people over fundraisers for them, and then he got off, and then probably 10 or 12 years ago, I was asked to go on the board then. So I served on the board, and we had opened an office up here. And I love, to me, the Nature Conservancy is one of the most wonderful things I've ever served on, because it's big picture things in terms of major flyways for to working with farmers to help them learn how to do some things to keep to be able to use their land and to decrease the amount of water they use. We've got hunting and fishing, all of that. We work with all kinds of state organizations to buy land and to preserve it, because we think that, Arkansas is a natural state, and we want to keep a lot of it natural and not all. We don't want to Dallasize or Houstonize, I hope, our state.
I know, I so agree.
Anyway, but young people we're doing really well, and I just feel like we put together, there's a Kings River project, there's a new project that's opening up Logan Springs. The amount of interesting, the things we've saved, endangered species, the things that we do, it's a wonderful organization, and it has been exciting to me to be a part of it. And at some point you need to interview Lee Bodenhammer, because he helped with a big project in Little Rock.
I will definitely
It's a wonderful,
do
it's
that.
just
Yeah.
we are conservationists. That's what we think it's important to
And
work.
I'm so hoping that the younger generations are following suit. I know they utilize the trails, they utilize the lake, and hopefully they'll just pick the torch up and keep Arkansas as natural as possible for all future generations, to absolutely enjoy.
Yeah.
I want to back up to your younger years, childhood. Tell us about born and raised, parents.
Well, I was born to the most wonderful parents in the world in Fairfax, Oklahoma, where my dad was a principal. And then when I was about 3, he moved our family and my sister. We moved to Tulsa, where he worked for Texaco Oil as an accountant, downtown in the Field Tower building. And I learned to navigate Tulsa when I was growing up. And lo and behold, when I was in the 7th grade, he told us that we were going to move to Springdale, Arkansas, where he was going to be the chief financial officer for a poultry company that had been started by former students of his. And so over my dead body, I said, but I was just not going. But of course, I've learned in life that what you think is the very worst thing can turn out to be the very best. And we were always raised that, everything works together for those who love God, and you just don't worry about it. So I moved to Springdale, and Springdale helped raise me. I used to babysit for some of the people's children who are here, and I know so many people who grew up there, and so fortunate to grow up in Springdale. It was wonderful.
There's a wonderful core group of folks from
Yeah.
Springdale, for
Yes.
sure.
And so I went to the University of Arkansas, and I mainly commuted because I had a job. I was a waitress at AQ. One of my best friend's dads owned it, and they knew that I needed to make some money, and I did that all the way through college. And
If you've ever eaten at AQ Chicken, raise your hand. Okay.
anyway, that was a wonderful experience. And then, so I finished school. I went to teach 1 year, and then I had saved my money. I was in a town of 3,000 people, and there wasn't a lot to do, but I learned a lot. I was by myself. I rented a room with a woman. In December, my brother was diagnosed with cancer, and I was flown home, and I decided that he had major surgery and chemo and everything that they could do at that time. And he lived till he was 70. So but I'm saying that it was a traumatic kind of experience. And so I decided I needed more education and I needed to be close to home. So I came back and started my master's. And but I'd saved money. I was going to go see my friend, Jenny Ritter, whose dad owned AQ. She was a nurse in Honolulu. And so I had decided that I was going to go spend the summer there. And I'd saved all my money. And my dad said, you have got to go have your eyes checked. They're more important than anything else. You can see he didn't really want me to leave. And I was helping with my brother. Anyway, so I called my ophthalmologist, and they said, oh, well, he's out of town for a month, but there's a new guy in town, and you need to go see him. So that's the new guy. And I went in, and he's just like he is now, kind, big brown eyes, and I went home and told my mother and my sister, I've met the man I'm going to marry. Now, how did I know that? I left the next day on a bus to L.A. and came back in August and started school. And lo and behold, one day, there he was in the student union because I didn't know anything about him and he was going to law school part-time. And so eventually, he finally asked me out, and we won't go into that, how long it took. Thanksgiving, I believe, from August till Thanksgiving. And we dated 2 years. And then I made up my mind. He was dating 5 different people. He was 32 when we got married.
Oh.
And I think that, when you're 32, you've seen enough things go wrong. And I just decided, well, I'm going to go someplace else. He can't make up his mind. So I had my ticket to go to Germany, and 2 days before we left, he proposed. And so
you did not board that plane.
I
He
did
made
not
sure
board
of
that
it.
plane, no. But I was going to because I can't sit around and wait on people to decide what they want to do. I mean, I'm not, yeah. He had 4 other people waiting, and I decided my life is mine to live, and
Absolutely.
so that's what we did. We got married 2 months later, August the 1st.
And you're now
57
and a half years of happy
That's right.
marriage. That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
We've been a team for 57 and a half years.
Sure have been.
That's so.
She joined me in going
Precious.
to law school, so we both graduated together.
Nathan, let's pull that photograph up. So after you married, you were currently
I was taking a
in
class at a time
a
in
class
law
at a
school.
time.
I was kind of interested in other things too, and Mother and Dad helped me with surgery and practice, so I could take off a little bit from time to time. But it took 10 years for me to get through law school. It took her 7 because she joined me, and then she started having babies.
Well,
But I love the fact that you graduated together and look at the
Oh, yes.
sweet children.
those
3
wonderful
kids.
children.
Tell us about those 3 fabulous kids of yours.
Well, our oldest is Paul, and he's took over Morris's practice here, and he's not only a wonderful physician, he's a great person. And he and his wife, who's a radiologist at the VA, have 3 children, and they range from 25 to 16. And then our daughter is the next. There was 14 months between them, and she and her husband are both ophthalmologists. in Little Rock, and they have 2 sons, both here at the university and in college. And so we see them quite a bit. And then our youngest son is a intellectual property lawyer here in town, and he has 3 children ranging from 22 to 16, two girls and a boy, and they're all, we're very fortunate to have 8 really wonderful grandchildren. And
All 8 are great.
our children
I
are-
bet Christmas is fun at your house.
Christmas is always fun.
Oh, yes.
Christmas, Thanksgiving, you name it. Yeah, we have a good time. And they love coming to Butterfield. My grandson came the other night and he said, "Oh, mother," he told his mother, "the food at Butterfield is so much better than what I get at the fraternity house." So, Memo, you're doing good.
Yes, he is. Okay, well, what I'd like to do is cover a couple of other things with you, Morris. Nathan, can you re-switch, please? We talked about Hobbs State Park, but then I know many of you will remember the movie The Color Purple, and it was written by a woman named Alice Walker. But then there's also another name that has been tagged to that wonderful book and author, and her name is Evelyn White, who wrote a book about Alice Walker titled Alice Walker, A Life. And tell us just a little bit about how that possibly involves you, Morris.
When I was a resident at Harvard, one of the professors came to me and said, "We have a young lady from Georgia who is very, very upset and very excited, and we've sent through her from Arkansas, which is not too far away. We'd like for you to do her surgery." She wasn't really on my schedule, but she was about 15 or 16 at the time. And what had happened was that her brother had shot at her with a BB, and it hit her in her eye. It caused the eye, cataract to turn white, a very disfiguring eye. And the little girl wouldn't look at anybody. She kept her head down all the time. Her brother, who was working in Boston, brought her up and brought her to the Massachusetts Eye and Ear Infirmary for surgery to see if they could do something about it. So I was asked to do the cataract operation, and I did. In those days, we kept them in the hospital for about 5 days, and when I'd make my rounds on her afterwards. Well, anyway, I talked to the lady, because we do it under local, and that's part of why they wanted me to do the operation, because I had kinfolks, an aunt and uncle that lived in Atlanta, Georgia, so there was some relationship that they wanted me to develop that with her, and she managed to go through the operation okay. But afterwards, she said, "What's your name? What's your name?" And I said, "Well, they call me Mo Henry for Morris Henry." And so later on, she said, "Well, I can remember that because of O. Henry." And I thought, that young lady is, you read that? I said, "Oh, yes." And she was a very intelligent young lady. She's a black girl that was very, there wasn't any question about it. She was very sharp. And as a result, later on, she got a scholarship to one of the Ivy League schools, and actually became a very famous writer as a result of it, Alice Walker. And she, as you said, one of her books became The Color Purple, and she's written many other books. And another kind of interesting thing recently, there's a museum in Georgia that for writers that are famous from Georgia.
Women writers.
Women writers. And the story was, they wanted to know if I had any instruments like I used in those days, which is, of course, out of date now with the new technology. But I found them in a box and sent some to them. So it's in that museum now, along with a picture that they wanted of me when I was a resident, which I found too. But Ann can tell a little more about how the story, they traced me down.
Evelyn White was authorized by Alice to write her official biography. And she felt that the most important thing, one of the historic things, was her surgery, because it changed her life in terms of her appearance. and she has actually wrote a short story about it, about how she kept her head down all the time, and then when she went back, she could look at people in the eye, and she found got a boyfriend, she was pregnant, just all these things, and how it changed her life. So she decided, well, I need to find out who did the surgery. So she went to Mass Eye and Ear and got the records, and we got a phone call one day saying that she wanted to come interview Morris. So I said, well, you can stay with us. We don't have any kids at home anymore. This was 95. And so she came down, and I found her. I knew somebody in the in the English department who also was an author, and I had her speak to them. And so I had her not just interview Morris, but let her have some of our Arkansas hospitality.
That's wonderful.
And so when the book came out, when it was published, the University of Arkansas Libraries had her come do a reading, and they sold books, and it was a really wonderful experience, and Morris's picture's in there, and the whole story's in there, and Evelyn and I still keep in touch, so it's fun.
It's just amazing how you can touch someone's life in the least way, and it changes their life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Be kind, people.
Yeah. Yes.
Every day, be kind. You never know whose life you can change for good.
Yeah.
So that's a precious story, absolutely. So switching over just a little bit, I would like for you to share with the audience, Morris, about the Jones Eye Research Institute in Little Rock. It's not been around that long, but give us a little idea of this and other programs that are helping in the state.
I was playing tennis with a friend down in Little Rock, Craig Wood, and Craig was retired, but he was actually a volunteer fundraiser for the medical school in Little Rock. And he said, I know that you're a patient. Miss Bernice Jones it's a patient of yours, and she's a very good philanthropist, and we'd like for you to ask her if she would be interested in helping at the Med Center for the Eye Center. Well, John Schock was the head of the department, which was a little place off in the big building, and they really didn't have adequate facilities at all. And so I talked to John Schock, and we arranged to meet Miss Jones, and being her ophthalmologist and ophthalmic surgeon, she trusted me, and so I was able to pass that trust on to John Schock. And as a result of that, I think she donated millions of dollars to build the Harvey Jones and Bernice Jones Eye Institute in Little Rock. And so a lot of it's as a result of that.
Okay. And and there's 5 residency programs established now in the state of Arkansas.
Yes,
Here.
we have.
Just in Northwest Arkansas. Mm-hmm. That's fabulous.
Okay, now, you were asking also about the program up here in Northwest Arkansas?
Yes.
Okay. They were looking for residency programs because even after you finish med school, you need about 3 more years in what they call a residency program, whether it's family practice or internal medicine or surgery or whatever, or more than 3 years sometimes. Well, there's a moratorium on it, and they couldn't really get any more residencies. So some of these med students were going through med school could not practice because they didn't have the residency program. Well, they thought they could develop it up here. And so I was on the advisory board, chairman for about 10 years, and we've had several residency programs up here. When I was in the legislature, we helped the AHEC program, which was family practice programs, and that goes back quite a ways.
Several people know AHEC, yes.
Yeah. But this was for internal medicine and surgery, and actually we had a board meeting just recently, the advisory board, and they're getting ready to start some other residency programs as well. So we were hoping it could have been in place long before now, but Washington Regional is part of the medical school program, and they're the ones that are putting it together to help really get this program going, but the other hospitals in the area are in the program as well. So we're now finally getting started with what we really need.
That's wonderful. That gives so many more opportunities.
Dan Ferreter is now the chairman of the advisory council. And so anyway, it's come along, but it's been slow.
Absolutely. Well, we're hoping that program,
And we have the benefit, we're the beneficiary at Butterfield because the internal medicine department is bringing their residents through here,
Through
and they're learning
UAMS.
also about gerontology. So
Yes.
it's a wonderful,
Oh,
it's
yes.
a great,
Dr. Wright's,
Dr. Wright
grad
is in
students,
charge of the
yes.
internal
He
medicine.
is a full professor in the medical school. So it's really, we're very, very fortunate
Yes,
that
we
we have
are.
what we have here.
Yes, we are. Well, I want to switch gears just a little. Can't help but touch on this. But Ann, when you were at the University of Arkansas, you made a friend. You had several, but you made a friend that has remained a lifelong friend to you and Morris, as well as her husband, over the years. So tell us about this special lady.
Well, actually, I wasn't at the university yet. I was a volunteer, and in '73, I met Bill Clinton, and then the next year, Hillary came, and we hit it off. We just instantly had a bond, and and when she came to teach, she and Diane Blair, and there was a small group of us, and we met, and we had a really good relationship, and so when Bill Clinton asked her to marry him, we had ended up having their wedding reception at our house after the wedding, and I got to know her parents, and we hosted several wedding receptions, as a matter of fact, and so we just opened our home, and we had big and we had small. And
In 1986, when Clinton became governor, or was governor, were you and Morris here when he gave the grand opening ceremony speech for Butterfield Trail Village? Groundbreaking ceremony, excuse me.
I don't remember. 86. I mean, that's been a long time
That's
ago.
been a long time ago.
We had a lot of things that we did, and we did a lot of things, but I didn't go to every groundbreaking. I did have 3 teenagers, and I had a full-time job, and I did the best I could. But sometimes you just can't do.
You
everything.
can't do everything.
No,
that's
but
for sure.
he did a lot for Arkansas. He loved Arkansas. It was never for him about money like today. Things were very different during the time that Morris was in the legislature,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I have been very saddened by the way that things are going now, but because it appears not to be as interested in the good, but what the good that could come from some people, it seems. And right now, we all work together to try to improve Arkansas and opportunities for children, we did a lot of things, worked on a lot of projects that helped improve Arkansas. At least that we thought it did. Now, somebody else could, everybody has their own opinion. But
Everybody has their opinion,
Yeah.
but I can tell you that it's still an honor to have a governor that has been president of the United States.
who
2
left us
terms.
who had left with a surplus the first, and it's never been that way again.
It's never been that way since.
And he located his all his records and everything at a library here in Arkansas. We're
And
very grateful for it.
Yes, if you ever have the opportunity to visit the Clinton Presidential Library in Little Rock, it is absolutely fabulous. And they do continue to change the exhibits. It's not the same thing over
The
and
exhibits
over.
are changed all the time, and it gives you, if you never get to DC, and you may never want to go, but presidential libraries are interesting, and it gives you a feel for the way in which it operates in terms of going there. So
Exactly.
it's good. And
Well, I just want to thank you both so much for sharing your lives with us today and just taking the time to help us get to know you better. You're a fabulous couple. I admire you so much. And when I visited with you in your apartment, you were sharing with me about a portrait that was on the wall. And Nathan, if you'll put that on there, and if you'll tell us just a little bit about this, because I think it's a great way to end our conversation today with this two beautiful smiling faces that are so in love.
Well, we went to Fayetteville Public Education. We're big public education people, and we went to a Public Education Foundation event, and it was at the Walton Art Center was fairly new, and they had all kinds of things at an auction, and we don't normally, but I put my hand up, and I made a bid on that, and it's a big picture, and it's a young woman that was here, and I just thought she captured it, and we had never had a portrait done of anything, and so I was glad we did it. It's kind of big. I don't know what they're going to do.
This is on your swing on your front porch.
On our front porch and the swing. That's right.
Well,
That's
there's
right.
a little story behind that. We were way at the
No,
back.
it's too late to say.
No, tell it.
Anyway, she'd raise up and this was for, people were volunteering these portraits for free. What we were doing is bidding, raising money for on this auction thing. So the portrait that we have was this young lady volunteered that. She did a beautiful job on it, but I'd go down to take care of the bill that she had bid, and I look around and her hand was up again. So, I mean, there was about 5 times I kept thinking, I've got to get
You
back
were
up there.
trying to check out, and she kept spending money.
One of the things,
Well, it was all right.
I like to bid up because somebody else, especially if somebody wants it, it makes more money for the organization.
Absolutely,
and,
yes.
And it's for a good cause, and
It was a good
that's
cause.
what we do. So, no, we bought one thing that day, and that was it. And it was a very reasonable, I mean, I can't believe what I wouldn't even tell you. It would be embarrassing. Of course, you look at everything today, it's so much more expensive because that's 92, that's 30 years ago.
Well, that resonates the happiness I see in the two of you back then and also today.
Well, we're very fortunate.
We are very
Grateful
fortunate.
to have each other. So,
And
thank you.
support from our families, because
Absolutely.
they made the difference. My mother and dad, her mother and dad, all of that back, and the friends that we've had
You
over
don't
the
need
years.
to do anything by yourself. You've got to
No.
have a.
All this is done
It takes
by-
a
It
village.
takes a village.
It does
It
take
takes
I
a
love
village.
that.
It really
So-
does.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Henry and Mrs. Henry. Thank you, and you have a wonderful day. And ladies and gentlemen, join us next month, and we'll be interviewing Springdale residents Dwayne and Glenda Newman. So have a wonderful day, everyone.